Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Paddocks. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Claire Williams, a name you may have heard on the grid before. On the episode today, we have Hannah, Amy, myself, Chelsea, and Leanne behind the scenes. To start us off, I'm going to pass it off to Amy for a little history on Claire's early life.
So there isn't a ton of information on Claire's early life outside of the fact that she has a very well-known father in the motorsport world. So Claire was born July 21st of 1976 in Windsor, England, and as I said, she is the daughter of a very famous man, Sir Frank Williams and Lady Virginia Williams. Claire is a graduate from Newcastle University and graduated in 1999 with a bachelor's in politics. And her father, as I said, is a very famous man, and he is the late Sir Frank Williams, who was a British businessman, a racing car driver, and was the founder of Williams Formula One team. And he was the team principal from its formation in 1977 until 2020. During that period, the team won 9 constructors' championships and 7 drivers' championships. Racing has always been in Claire's life, and she's quoted in an interview as saying, "To grow up around Formula One was magical. The Williams factory was a second home for me." And true to that statement, Claire worked in the racing office during school holidays and was a regular behind their desks, was a regular behind the scenes at Williams from a very early age.
And it was because of that early work she did growing up that we actually saw her officially join the family business in 2002 as the communications officer. Now, this wasn't her official first job in motorsports. Really, that her first main job had actually started as a press officer for Silverstone, which was in 2000. But she worked for her family business after that, and it was just this beautiful moment for her because a goal of hers after some point ended up being to really work and do well by the company. She loved her job at Silverstone too, by the way, don't get me wrong. But she said basically the position became redundant after a while. So she was either going to stay at the job and kind of keep doing this redundant work, or she had an opening at her father's company, which, shout out to her, because if my daddy had an opening and I was I'm really bored of this job, I would probably go over there too. So she did that. She transferred to her dad's company, and it actually wasn't really easy for her to get into there. Her dad really had to one, she had to convince her dad because her dad didn't want her working at Williams. And then on top of that, once he was okay, fine, I guess you can work for me, he had to lobby to get her hired by the company because everyone else was why are we just hiring your daughter who really just has this one job experience? But you know what? It worked out for her really well. And for the 6 years, the first 6 years that she was the communication executive press officer, she was pretty low busy. She mostly stayed in their headquarters because she only went to a few races. It was mostly a quiet position in the background. Her main goals were to handle all the interview requests back at the factory and mostly just do a lot of filming. So for their social media, for their YouTube, for shows or any presentations they had to do, that was her main purpose. But after 4 years, she had a few promotions thrown in there. She had junior press officer, main press officer, and then we saw her go into head of communications in 2010. Now, this made her responsible for all the internal and the external communications that just surrounded Williams Grand Prix Holding PLC as a whole. The whole business official title, that was her main worry. But she really only held this position for a year because she ended up moving again, which Amy has more information on.
And as Chelsea mentioned, it only was a year later that Claire took on a new position. And in March of 2011, she took on the position of head of investor relations to supplement her role in the communications team. She's been playing a lead role as Williams made the switch from a private ownership to a public ownership through their listing on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange in 2011. And then in 2012, she was promoted to the director of marketing and communications. When her father stepped down in March of 2012, she became the Williams family representative on their board because Like with most family companies, there's always at least one person on your board with the last name on the front door. Whether that's Williams or something different, there's always at least one family member on board. And so she took that seat. In March of 2013, she was appointed as the deputy team principal of Williams' F1 racing team. And in this role, she was the de facto team boss and assumed the day to day running of the team from her father. Now, I do want to point out that Claire was taking over after some of the worst years in the team's history. Williams Williams F1 decided to replace their drivers by signing Felipe Massa and Valtteri Bottas, along with restructuring their engineering department. The team also switched to Mercedes engines, and became a test bed for the development of hybrid technology in engines and kinetic energy recovery systems, aka KERS, which you'll see in Formula One and motorsports in general. Williams F1 also increased the team's racing budget by securing profitable corporate sponsorships, factors that led the team to somewhat of a renaissance between 2014 and 2017, when it finished third twice and then finished fifth.
And I know we're going to talk about Williams' issues later, but you know what? Before we even get there, Claire really did elevate the team, okay? They had their best run for like ever since like 2003. And she really did try being a good principal. Like there was a quote, and she shared this in an interview when she was moving up. And I really want to share it because like I feel this as someone whose dad owns a company. Her quote is, "You never want to let your parents down. When you're younger, you really don't care that much, but when you're older, you really want them to be proud of you. Dad has really put his trust in me, and I'm always worried he is going to tell me to go home, but he doesn't." She said, adding, "I'm not starting a team from scratch. I've inherited a team that's 40 years old. And with that comes issues within itself. So Dad is there, and he is a huge tower of strength for me. Seeing him reminds me why I'm doing that, and that I'm doing this for him and the family." The team wasn't just a business for her, and I think that's why Claire cared so much. You know, she really did want the best for it, and she treated that team like an extension of her family, like another family member to take care of. And I feel like you really see that in all the initiatives that Amy talked about.
Chelsea is really right with that. I loved when she took over and decided that she needed to just turn everything on its head and go, okay, I love this family and I love what we stand for, but we need to turn some things on its head to see where we can get. And she really did do that, and it delivered. Under her leadership, Williams F1 launched initiatives guiding students into engineering careers, redeveloped the team's work with its official charity, the Spinal Injuries Association, and supported F1's sustainability strategy through the expansion of the WAE technologies. While trying to revive the Williams F1 team, Claire was also appointed Officer of the Order of the British Empire, or OBE, for her service in F1 racing in 2016 with the Queen's birthday honors, which I just think is a really fun fact. There are quite a few other OBEs and MBEs on the grid, but I just love that Claire, as a woman, has one specifically for motorsport. I just think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and now that we move forward after the 2016 season, gonna be frankly honest with you, 2017, 2018, 2019 were very similar, with Claire Williams and the Williams F1 team, as she still remained team principal. They suffered as a team, and you could see the increasing struggle without the years coming more prevalent. To keep moving forward and strive for improvements. And the break with COVID hitting everyone, and then that major setback, and then that financial support. It just seemed to be like one punch after another. So, as Williams was faced with the economic impact of the pandemic, plus commercial like terms slash sponsorships that increasingly seem to favor more of the bigger teams versus the smaller ones, Williams was forced to put the team up for sale to secure its ultimate future, deciding to sell to a private investment firm called, and I'm going to butcher this, so I apologize in advance, Doralton, in August of 2020. So on September 3rd, 2020, Williams announced she was resigning as deputy team principal of Williams' team after the 2020 Italian Grand Prix. Before the race at the Williams motorhome, she was actually given the front ring of a car of the F 136 as a souvenir, and it was actually signed by everybody, which was super sweet, so she could keep it forever. One of Claire's final words were, "We kept everyone in jobs. No administration had to get involved. I'm very proud of that during my time at Williams, despite the struggles we continue to face." Frank Williams had suffered numerous health issues in his final years and was admitted to the hospital days before his passing. Um, but having built one of the sport's most successful teams during his time as the leader of Williams, taking 9 constructor championships and 7 driver championships over the course of 40 years. Talk about inheriting a big team. The sale of the Williams F1 team, Doralton, didn't result in a name change as the team's new owners opted to retain its history, which is very rich. And I, for one, am very proud of that. Now, as Claire looks back on her time in charge in the final days of their ownership of the team, Williams recalled, "There was so much that went on in those last few years, which to this day I will never be able to talk about. But I saw the team through 3 very difficult seasons." Like she couldn't catch a break. And, one of the most positive things that she said is, "I was able to hand over something that was still living, still breathing to someone with deeper pockets than me." And as someone who probably has to pay a lot of money for an F1 team, I feel you, girl. As much as Claire misses Formula One dreadfully, there is a whole other world out there, and she has had to go out and find happiness elsewhere. And that is what she has done. She notes that after the passing of her father, it's been quite difficult to watch or go to an F1 race, but it's something she lived and breathed with her father for over 20 years, and it will honestly always be a part of her. Now, during her tenure, Claire was keen to advocate for greater diversity and inclusion within Williams racing and across the sport as a whole. She acted as a catalyst to give Susie Wolf the chance to become the first female racing driver to participate in a Formula One race weekend since 1992. And to add to that, Susie Wolf did not disappoint with that opportunity. Now, as vice president of the Spinal Injury Association, Claire has sought to encourage spinal cord injured individuals into the team and establish workplace opportunities for wheelchairs. I love that. In April of 2023, she launched the Sir Frank Williams Academy, which aims to provide life changing care for spinal cord injured people, a charitable initiative which has received support from Williams Racing Team as a huge backing. Since successfully negotiating the sale of the F1 of Williams F1 team in 2020, Claire has provided consultancy services to brands entering Formula One and is a popular speaker at corporate events where she shares insights on leading high performing teams. And today she is a global brand ambassador for WAE Technology, which known as Williams Advanced Engineering, which focuses on the decarbonization of heavy transport through the development of an advanced sustainable green technology, which is what F1 is ultimately trying to do for the future. So while we don't see Claire physically working with Williams or on our loving TVs every day, it has nice to see that she's made such a big impact in her life going forward.
Well, now that we have talked about the beautiful things she's done, I would like to talk about the trashy reality TV she has done, which is DTS. DTS is trashy reality TV. No one can fight me on that shit. Anyways, I loved watching her on there. I remember when I first started watching it, I was obviously I was like learning about the sport, so I had no clue there was even like a woman team principal. And I thought it was so funny because the way they introduce her, they don't really make it like a spectacle. They're just kind of like, she's the team principal, that's it, right? And I appreciated that because I was such a new fan. I thought it was normal. I was like, oh yeah, woman team principal, sure, that's normal. It's not normal at all. And I loved how much DTS almost like normalized it for me as a viewer, because now I have an expectation to see it again. And it was really, I think, interesting to watch Claire on that show because I really respected her. Because she's so honest, like she's like, Williams is not doing well. Like, we are trying our best. Like, this is what we can do. This is what we've done. And there was a quote when she first got her position as a team principal. She's like, I want what's best. And if someone tells me to step down, like, I will step down. And she did. When that time came for her that she was like, I can no longer run this company the best way possible, she like took the step back with grace, poise, like beautiful, and gave it, like she said, to someone who had the deeper pockets, which makes me laugh. Because she's right. Like, she gave a living, breathing team, which is still living and breathing and doing beautifully this past season. Alex Albon is like, God, fucking amazing. Excuse my language, but beautiful driver. And I'm sure there's like moments where she's watching and she's like, I was able to make that still be possible under the Williams name. Because it's happening, and it's still happening under her father's name.
I think my favorite thing with how DTS portrayed Claire was that she just kind of came across really normal to me. Like, she just came across very down to earth and very honest, which was just really nice and kind of refreshing. Like, she just felt so welcoming and so warm and so like someone that I would like want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with. And like, she didn't come off as, I guess, intimidating, because I think some of the men in F1 tend to come across with their bigger personas. She just came off very wholesome and very clear. Like, it just feel like she was being very authentic, which was really nice to see. I remember being an F1 fan before DTS and noticing the switch for her taking over for the team, but never really knowing a lot about her, because she was never a team principal who would give you splashy headlines from a press conference. That just wasn't Claire.
I feel like from a Claire's perspective, she didn't shy away from letting you see behind closed doors, kind of what was going on, kind of some of the issues, kind of some of the struggles. And I really appreciated that, because you don't get that with some of the other teams. You get like little snippets, like almost clickbait, like insinuating that something's going on or insinuating that there's an issue, but then not the full story or the full truth. No, Claire let you see it all, the raw, terrible shit, to be honest with you. But, and I actually love that because it made her feel more relatable, I guess, to me watching it back, going, you understand. I mean, your issues are bigger, but you understand. Thank you. But I did want to add, if I remember looking back at season 3, DTS, DTS, I, when Sir Frank Williams had passed away, they kind of did Claire a little dirty there. And if I remember correctly and look back at it, I think Claire Williams was very like respectful about like how DTS had kind of like handled that situation. But in reality, DTS, you did her dirty.
I will say something I thought was interesting. I wanted to like look more into like why Williams kind of had a downfall, because I don't think it fell on Claire's. I think it happened before Claire, and then she just kind of got stuck with the garbage end, right? And one of the things I saw, and I was like, oh, I didn't know, was that, and I forgot that we talked about on the Williams episode, which, by the way, listen, Nui worked for them as their like designer. And I was like, I wonder why he left. And it was because they switched drivers behind his back. And he thought that was like a dirty move. And he left. He left the company. And like I think that would have to have been one of the main reasons their cars started going down.
Yeah, well, we could do an episode on Adrian Newey himself. That would be, I don't even know, that would be intense. I don't know if anybody would want to actually sit there and listen to us ramble about how much of an engineering genius he is, but he could deserves his whole own episode. But you are right, Chelsea. Claire very much so inherited a broken team in terms of just team dynamic, the build of the car. She inherited the problem. Absolutely.
But I think she handled it with poise on how to proceed going forward. And then it's got to be a very tough decision for anybody to realize what I'm doing is no longer working. I'm trying my hardest. The financial backing's getting rough. It's time to part ways with something that's probably so deep originated and inherited in her family. It's probably going to have been a very, very tough decision. But, and while we didn't get to see behind closed door, I feel like she handled it very well. And the team kept its name. I mean, they kept the rich history there. And that's to never be forgotten. I mean, when I think of Williams, I think of Frank Williams, the person, the founder, the creator, the legend. But like Chelsea said, go watch the episode. It's great.
And okay, speaking of someone that just made a really big career move, Mr. Lewis Hamilton, he almost went to Williams when Claire was the principal. So I think it was 2003, 2004. I was reading about it. I think he was like having some like friction with McLaren, and he like contemplated just he explored the options of going to Williams, which honestly, if you think about it, butterfly effect, that would have completely changed his career path. But I mean, at the time, Williams was like under Frank Williams. You know, they were, I think, working with BMW at the time. They had some issues already. Like Williams was already having issues with like money, so that would have screwed over Hamilton. And I think what happened was Frank Williams, he like I think he like notably he noticed he's like, if I bring this kid onto the team, like I'm going to mess up his like future. So apparently Frank Williams and Hamilton, they had like a pretty good relationship because he was just so honest with Hamilton about it. He's like, if you come to my team, I have to tell you, like, we are having financial issues. And I respect that so much because just imagine if Lewis had left to that instead of Mercedes. He wouldn't be who he is today. Or if he would, it would have taken him a lot longer.
I think the one thing that I have noticed with looking back at Claire's just how she ran the team, who she's selected for drivers, she's got a really good eye for driver pairings, and she's got a really good eye for drivers with talent. Because almost every driver she's had that she's brought in has been a race winner, whether they've won with Williams or not. They've all been fantastic drivers. I mean, obviously, the big one that I think most people will think about is George Russell. Like, if Claire had not pulled George in, I really wonder where George's career would be now. Honestly, I think you could pose the same kind of theory of like, well, what would Lewis's career look like? What would George's career look like without Claire and without Williams?
I feel like George is her golden child. Like, she has to see him driving now for Mercedes and be like, I had a part in that. Like, I did that.
When I was doing research and kind of looking at everything, one of the things that she had said was that, you know, if she looks back at anything over the years of her being team principal, she's very happy that she gave George Russell that stepping stone to the major team like Mercedes, and that she kind of helped morph him, or the team helped provide him that place for the next step for the future. And she like looks back, or in the past, and what I read was she had looked back and said like that was a great achievement, and it gave her a lot of like excitement knowing that she was able to do that for that driver.
I think what also may have led to Williams' downfall is, and I say downfall in the sense that like she had to leave the team and give it to someone else, was just like change. I think the society was changing, business was changing, business structures were going really quickly, and they had a very old mentality team. Frank Williams was very well known for saying, I have 9 constructor titles, I know what I'm doing. So he didn't really partake that much in learning new structures and learning the new technology that was coming into F1. And Williams, we talk about in the show, they were a very traditional team, you know? They were one of the oldest teams. Like, they started from the beginning and they really tried. I think their problem was they tried sticking too much to those traditions and they weren't keeping up with the changes. And once they started losing that funding because they weren't keeping up with the changes, it started trickling into the car designing and just really the car itself, because Claire was known for being a good manager. It was the car that was the problem.
I think to some degree, like Chelsea, what you said is, they stuck to what they know or what worked in the past and not necessarily looking to develop towards the future like all the other teams were. And then once they did, they were playing catch up and there wasn't enough time, not enough years to obtain that knowledge that every other team had been working towards and going with the program as it was coming out. And so, with that, you need that financial backing to make those changes and try those things instead of just doing like small little changes here or there. And I think that's where like the little bit of the struggle was. And it's got to be hard. It's got to be difficult. You're like, I know what we could do. I know who we probably could hire, or like if they had kept Adrian Newey. But at the same time, if you had kept Adrian Newey, you would have had to probably had a huge financial backing from his engineering standpoint to get them to where they are, like he does for Red Bull.
So I was going to say, speaking about Newey, the reason Red Bull did so well as a new team was because they went hard on the technical with Newey. Like, they gave that to him and they were known as the technical team. And yes, they had the funding for it. Obviously, we all know Red Bull is a rich company and that helped them a lot in the backing, but it was also just trusting the person that is in this career to take over. Red Bull didn't try pretending they knew what they were doing, you know? They said, we want to be in F1, let's do it right. And because they were so new and coming into it so fresh, they didn't have any traditional things holding them back to being crazy and just doing whatever they thought worked. That's what Red Bull does. They go into it crazy. You see that in everything they do. And it is crazy, but it worked ridiculously well for them.
You are right, Chelsea. Red Bull kind of branded themselves as like the bad boys of F1, and Williams, in my opinion, was always like the classic F1 team. They still are. They're like, even though they are no longer owned by the Williams family, they in my head will just always be the prim, proper, classy, posh F1 team that I think of. Like that historic, they are that historic Formula One team for so many Formula One fans, even whether you're American, whether you're based in the UK, whether you're based anywhere else in Europe, Asia, like they're just that historic team for so many people, myself included.
We should also acknowledge that I don't think Claire had 100% control on this. She was, if you like look at the interviews, she never calls herself team principal. She calls herself deputy team principal. So like, if you just keep that in mind, like her dad was constantly around because he passed away after the company was sold.
So she was in her position because she was placed there by the board. So there definitely were other people who were holding reins for sure. She was not let loose to just do what she wanted to do with the team, sadly.
But I honestly think even after like the sell of the team, if Claire ever reached out to Williams and was like, I want to go to an F1 race, they they would never, honestly, I can't speak for Williams because I don't work for Williams, but they would be like, oh, here's tickets, here's paddock passes, like come on, let's go. Like, because she's Claire Williams. I mean, she's a Williams. At least in my head, I'm like, that girl deserves a reward, especially for everything that she went through and everything she dealt with, and the remarkable job and even the stepping stone for women in motorsports and being the first woman team principal. I mean, that's amazing.
And like she wasn't that welcomed when she became the deputy head principal. There was Jacques Jacques Villeneuve. He did like an interview after she got hired, and he called out Williams, and he was like that like the team is dead. Like I don't see that going. I don't see anything happening there. Like they should have chosen her brother apparently, who I think his name was Jonathan. And Villeneuve was like the team management is like there is simply no team management. And I think it sucks because I mean I didn't really see that much into like the Jonathan Claire thing. That was really the only thing I saw. But supposedly, and I love this. I love this. Frank Williams said in basically these words that the brother did not have the balls to run an F1 team. So I thought that was beautiful. Like that man stuck up for his daughter. He's like, no, if anything, she's gonna do better than her brother. Did he probably like feed her things and maybe do like some work? I feel like yeah, probably. But at the end of the day, the man did own the team. He just kind of had to step away from the role because the board told him to. And still going and saying like, "Now we're still gonna choose the daughter." Hilarious. Sorry, Jack, you're wrong. It was the car. It was not her.
Jonathan didn't even want it though either. Like I remember seeing an interview where he was just like, I don't want it. Like if I'm given it, I guess I'll do it. But he didn't have the desire for it. And it takes balls to run an F1 team, and you need to grow some in order to do it. And Claire had them. And she might be a woman, but she was damn good at her job.
And even with the partial control she had, she still did good work. At least I think she did.
Or she did the best that she could control in that moment. And that's all anybody could ever ask her to do. Like, you can't snap your fingers and go this and expect it to be done.
Yeah, she really did. She changed what she could, when she could, how she could. And I really think the changes that she made did the team a world of good. I definitely think they've even impacted how the team functions currently in some ways. I think also a lot of the values that just Claire holds as a human being are still very much so important to the team. And I think that's fantastic from the fact that they were purchased by a corporation and they're still being run similarly to how they were when they were run by a family, which I think is not an easy thing to pull off from a business standpoint.
I will say, if you want to like learn more about the family, like Frank Williams, pretty sure it was on Amazon Prime. There is a Williams documentary, and supposedly it really goes into like this man being very stubborn, like very stubborn, very. No, I'm serious. You're laughing, but I'm serious. This man goes into it. They go into being very stubborn, very kind of like machismo. I don't know the English word. Just very like stubborn, and very in charge. Like if he said it had to be done this way, he expected it to be done that way, and he did not expect you to give him advice on how he wanted it done. He just wanted you to know how he wanted it done. And I can't imagine as someone that's trying to change things and trying to make the team better, having to deal with that constantly. So if we take all these things into regard, that this man was still doing business meetings and still trying to handle Formula One business while she was deputy, you have to kind of respect that she stuck to it as long as she did.
And Frank was going on or dealing with a lot of health issues, and he had been dealing with it for many, many years. It wasn't just predominantly in 2020. No, I mean, this was 20 years of dealing with consistent issues in and out of the hospital, dealing with injuries that he had suffered from racing and other items. And despite all of that, he put the business as his priority, even after Claire took over, like Chelsea had said. I mean, he was very much like, this is my baby. I'm not focusing on my health. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to feed you this information in your ear to help you, all that, because like he loved the team so much, and it's got to be very hard to like step away and like fully just retired like most average people will. But when you built something as incredible as Williams, I don't blame you one bit.
I know if that was me, I wouldn't want to let that go very easily, but I'm also a control freak. And I think most people who work in Formula One are definitely a little bit controlling in some ways. To follow up on the documentary that Chelsea mentioned, there's also a book about him for any of my fellow book nerds. If you like to read a good biography, there is a story of Frank Williams bio out there. I have not read it myself, but I am about to order it on Amazon so that I can give it a read and kind of see if it's any good. I'm interested. I love Formula One biographies, so I'll add it to my list. Well, while we could talk about Claire Williams and Williams F1 all day, and we definitely could, and we have, we are going to close out this episode with a team principal quote. And this is a quote from Claire where she says, "If you have the freedom to fly, why not take the scenic route?" And I just think it's a really nice inspirational quote and something that everybody should stop and do every so often.
Now, I really enjoy any of these informational episodes, especially one where we get to learn about who I honestly think is a part of the royal family of F1. Let us know who else you want to hear about. Everywhere we are at Paddock Girls Podcast, except Twitter. There you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. It's getting closer and closer to race weekend, and I know all of us are excited. So watch out for our socials where we just like pop off. Have fun with it. Thanks for joining us in the paddock. See you next race. Bye.
Bye.
See you later.
Bye.